everyone. Welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report on or don't report on enough. And you guys have gotten smart about stories nowadays. You have been sending me DMs with requests for stories that you want to hear. And let me just say thank you. It takes a boatload of work off of my plate when I know what stories you guys want to hear and what stories you want me to report on for you. And the most requested story for today was about Trump's jumbo jet as a gift from the Qatari government. So let's get set up with the facts today, okay? Trump is set to accept a luxury Boeing 737-8 jumbo jet as a gift from the Qatari royal family during his Middle East trip, which he landed there this morning. The Trump administration contends that this gift would actually save taxpayer money because we are currently on the hook for an updated Air Force One Boeing jet that is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and will not be ready until 2027. And now, according to the Trump administration, we get a free version of that Air Force that we can turn into the new Air Force One. But the big question that a lot of people have been asking me are, is it legal? Is this legal? The Constitution has a pretty clear clause. It's called the Emoluments Clause, which prohibits the president from accepting foreign gifts and money without Congress's permission. The Department of Justice says that accepting the jet is legal since it's not conditioned on any official act. And after Trump is done with his presidency, the plane will be then transferred over to the Trump Presidential Library. Joining me today for this show and to discuss this story is New York Post immigration reporter Jennie Taer. Welcome, Jennie.
Thanks for having me, Chrissy.
Yeah, of course. So I just gave all the backstory on that. What was your initial take when you heard about this Trump gifted plane story?
Yeah, well, first of all, you mentioned something that I feel like has been buried is that are we getting a Trump library at the end of his presidency that, we're going to have this plane in? I think that's kind of newsy. But also, I think that there's definitely been a debate about whether this is legal, but also just what is going on in Qatar with regard to their dealings in the world. And it's brought up some of those issues. Right now, we obviously have an ongoing war in Israel between Hamas and the IDF over October 7th. That was when, the surprise attack from Hamas happened. And, we had hundreds of people kidnapped. We had hundreds of others killed. And on top of that, we learned, that continued aid from Qatar going to Hamas is behind some of these things. I mean, since Qatar has been giving billions of dollars to Hamas, they've engaged in 5 wars in the region. So that's all come up right now as we've learned about this gift. Now, the Trump administration and the president still defends it. And they say that, it was signed off on by the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi. So all of the legal checks have gone through their processes. And now it's just a lot of backlash. And I think also it's a little bit of whiplash because yesterday we had the release of American hostage Adon Alexander. Thank God. At the same time, we were talking about this Qatar deal and what was to come of that. And we know that Trump is in the Middle East this week, having conversations with many different governments. He's in Saudi today. He's in Saudi Arabia. And so I think in some ways there's been, some legitimate criticism of this deal, maybe not necessarily on the legality, but on the fact that it's a terrorist proxy. Hamas is a terrorist proxy of Qatar. And we know that we are at odds with Hamas, just as Israel is at odds with Hamas.
Yeah, I think that's just as some background for those in the listening audience. The Qatari government is the second largest sponsor of jihad terrorism in the world. So we're not exactly talking about maybe the best actors in the world, to put it lightly. Jennie, when I saw this story, I was just kind of struck by nothing about it legally. I thought, legally, I think it's dicey, but I understand how they came to the conclusion that they came to the conclusion on the way that they are interpreting the law. However, let's just put into the context of what's happening culturally for the average American. I'm going to be honest. I don't care if Air Force One is like a little out of date. We're looking right now at all of the planes the average American has to fly on. Doors are falling off. They're flipping over on tarmacs. We can't connect to aircraft traffic control. And here we are complaining that the updated Air Force One might take an extra 2 years. Like, I know he's our president and I want him to be safe, but unless this current Air Force One is somehow unsafe, it just feels a little out of touch, don't you think?
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I think that's what a lot of American voters feel like, and probably a lot of your viewers, is that, okay, how does this relate back to how we're feeling in our daily lives, on our flights, with the situation in Newark, with air traffic control? I mean, all of these issues are pertinent right now. They're very much happening in real time for everyone that's traveling. And so it does go back to, okay, well, are we losing touch with some of those issues? And, I think when it comes to the Qatar question too, we could, talk about the fact that there are some legitimate relations that we have with Qatar. I mean, they do allow us to station thousands of troops in their country. It's a strategic point for us to launch strikes in the Middle East. Right now, more than ever, we need that. Also, the UK has troops down there. But going back to the plane itself, yeah, I mean, maybe people do see it as a little out of touch.
Yeah. I also just wanted to kind of issue a warning. This was just insider tea. I wanted to issue a warning to viewers, and I figured I'd just share the story with you as well. So I'm not going to say who or what, but I will just say somebody reached out to me as a conservative influencer to go on a trip to Qatar. And nothing ever came of it. It was not happening. But I just found it really interesting. In lots of the times, conservative influencers will be approached to go to Israel. And it's actually really a strategically smart decision. Is a lot of these nonprofits will have influencers come out to Israel. It's paid for, but they tell you off the bat, both times I've gone on a trip like this, they tell you off the bat, there's no posting requirements. You come away with whatever version of this you come away from. If you come to Israel, go to the West Bank, and you want to be pro-Palestinian, cool. Like, that's your opinion. You can totally have it. We are just here to show you around, and if you like it, you like it. If you hate it, you hate it. That is kind of always how those trips have gone. It was super interesting because I was very curious, after being approached about potentially going to Qatar, what that would look like and whether that would be a free and open discussion or whether there would be posting requirements and how that would work. But it got me thinking about the way that the Qatari government, obviously I experienced this personally a couple weeks ago, and you see that happening now at the government level, and I'm like, okay, the Qatari government is clearly trying to reach their hands into the conservative movement, and they must think that we are for sale in some capacity. That is not true, but it's really fascinating to see the way in which they're all of a sudden trying to sneak their claws into everything that we're talking about in American politics right now. Isn't that fascinating?
It's really interesting. I mean, to think about that, but also just there's a lot of things they've been doing that I don't think a lot of us have paid attention to for years now. I mean, one of the things is the stronghold they have over our universities. They're the top donor to American universities, the top foreign donor. And on top of that, they host like satellite campuses of different universities, Northwest or Northeastern, I believe. There's also, a Georgetown campus there. There's a couple other schools, big schools from the United States that are present in Qatar with the help of Qatar. I mean, they're not just there, they're working with Qatari entities. I mean, there was a journalism school that was working hand in hand for years, a U.S. journalism
Northwestern.
school. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Northwestern.
Premier journalism school in America. You're totally right.
Working hand in hand with Al Jazeera, which is a mouthpiece for the Qatari government. And thank God that was stopped by Congress. But, that's a big ordeal that you had U.S. students working with what people have argued is a propaganda arm for a terrorist funding state, to then go back to their home country, the United States, and possibly, go into journalism here and go into the media.
Yeah, and you see that correlation already ticking up. It's really interesting. Well, I don't want to waste any more time. Guys, let's pull up our docket. We've got an immigration reporter with us, so obviously our stories here today need to be immigration focused. We're going to be talking about the lawmakers who stormed an ICE facility, a probe into whether LA is paying welfare to illegal immigrants, and whether my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee is about to become a sanctuary city. We're going to get into all of that. Plus, after Jennie leaves at the end of today's show, we will be getting into updates on the first day of Diddy's trial. So, without further ado, let's get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Today's show is brought to you by Branch Basics. I love uncovering the truth in politics, in media, and even the truth about what's in our so-called cleaning products. Most store-bought cleaning products are loaded with toxic chemicals, hormone disruptors, and allergens. This is stuff that can impact your health, your kids' health, and even your pet's health. That's why I made the switch to Branch Basics. Their products are completely non-toxic. They're completely human safe. No weird synthetic fragrances or weird chemicals. My mom came over this weekend for Mother's Day, and she saw Branch Basics, and she literally looked at me and said, "I am so proud of you for having this in your house." So make your mama proud and get Branch Basics. If you're ready to toss the toxins, head over to branchbasics.com/Chrissy, or you can use the link in the description. Again, use code Chrissy, CHRISSY, to get 15% off of your first order. Use code Chrissy at checkout. Democrats and lawmakers stormed the gates of an immigration detention facility in New Jersey to advocate for the detainees in the prison. This protest was led by 3 New Jersey representatives, most notably a New Jersey representative named LaMonica McIver. She went on CNN and she said, quote, "Nothing happened when protesters, including herself, tried to storm an ICE detention facility." Let me pull up a clip of what that looked like.
But there's no reason for it. Nothing happened other than the chaos that they created themselves. If anything, we were pushed and shoved and found in a very vulnerable situation for the 3 of us.
Okay, so for those in the viewing audience, in the listening audience, you could see on the screen the "nothing happened" was her storming an ICE detention facility. Jennie, do you know any extra details about this story that maybe we're leaving out here?
Yeah, sure. So this involved, these members of Congress and then also the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. They all tried to enter this facility without giving any notice. And
The mayor was there?
yes, the mayor of Newark, and he was actually arrested after this. So what's known about this situation is that when you're a member of Congress, you absolutely have a right to go into federal facilities. If you're a local politician, you do not. And so without written permission from ICE to go and tour this facility, you wouldn't be allowed in. You're not a federal official and you don't have oversight over ICE detention facilities. Now, these members of Congress, normally what happens is you put in a formal request to tour a facility and you show up for what's approved by ICE. Now, they can show up and they can be let in. But it's clear that they caused a spectacle with protesters. You can see from that footage, ICE and DHS, they're saying that one of the members of Congress was pushing and assaulting an ICE officer. I mean, it really went into pure chaos in that moment. And, with what we know is they could have gone into the facility, yes, without the Newark mayor, but they could have gone in and it couldn't have been so chaotic and so violent, but it turned out that way because of what they brought in and because, it appears that they wanted to make a spectacle.
You're right. It does appear that they wanted to make a spectacle. They wanted the attention. They wanted the press. They feel like this issue was not getting enough press, which is ironic because I really don't think this is a winning issue for them. Fox News did a great write-up for All I Slam Fox News for. This was a really good, informative write-up talking about what prisoners are in the facility that these lawmakers were advocating for. And a couple of names mentioned were Ramos Marin. He's wanted for murder in Brazil, and this is subject of an active Interpol red notice. There was another guy named Adonis Estevez Bayo. He has multiple felony convictions, including drug trafficking, resisting arrest, possession of weapons for unlawful purposes, and he's directly affiliated with a gang called Dominicans Don't Play, which is quite the name. And I just feel like how were the Democrats storming ICE facilities for these guys? Obviously, you're a reporter, so you like to take this to the middle of the road. But if you could take your reporter hat off for a second and just analyze this politically as someone that's lived in the Northeast and seen all of this, like, what do you see in terms of public sentiment about this border issue? Maybe now that you've moved from the Northeast to Texas to Middle America to kind of see the change in public sentiment.
Sure. I mean, people down here in Texas really support this mass deportation effort and support detaining illegal migrant criminals. And that's really what DHS was highlighting, sharing some of these individuals who are in that facility. It's not just individuals who are just there, who were caught up in some ICE raid, who are here illegally. Those individuals, if they go through the court system and there's a judge that oversees what the Trump administration is doing, they can decide, this person can bond out of custody. We'll give him a low bond amount and they'll, be out of detention. So there is a system of checks and balances here that Democrats are ignoring when it comes to who's in immigration detention. Now, they've always had this crusade against, private detention centers, private prisons, and this facility happens to be run by a contractor. ICE is really having to heavily rely on that right now because they're running out of detention beds. I mean, with the amount of people they're going out every day and arresting that are here illegally, that are committing crimes, it's a huge amount of people that is beyond what they can hold. And so they are forced to have to open these detention facilities and have to have some that are privately run. But the standards for detention are higher than the federal prison system. So ICE has been always under scrutiny. They've always been under the microscope. And so they've constantly had to change their ways and make sure that detainees have enough time of recreation, have access to lawyers, have access to, social gatherings within the prison. I mean, their doors are not locked in their cells. So this is just something that is being ignored. But the American people know that there's, a system there. They know that, there's not just a bunch of people in there who are not criminals, who aren't gang members, this is, something that people who are in Middle America know. They are supportive of this effort. It became a top issue this election for Americans, and they voted based on that largely. And so Democrats are not seeing that, and it's continuing to hurt them, I think.
That is such insightful information, and it really gives a little bit more context as to why the Democrats are going so aggressive in this direction, specifically towards this ICE detention facility. When you start to recognize that it's multifaceted, it's not just the immigration issue, but it's the private prison issue, and it's like a litany of all the things that they hate, kind of burdening up or stacking one atop the other. It gives you so much more insight. So thank you for that. This is why I love reading your work. I think we talk about a Jennie Taer story probably once a week on this show, and the show only goes out 2 times a week. So we're huge fans. There is another story that you've been covering. You reported on, came out yesterday. If you weren't on the show, it would still be a story today. Let me read some of the top line details, Jennie, and then I'll have you explain the weeds to us. So the Trump administration has launched an investigation into Los Angeles County's welfare program that pays immigrants up to $18,000 per year over allegations that the benefits right now are not being used just for legal immigrants, but are being paid out to illegal aliens. Tell us a little bit about this story.
Right. So the Trump administration has opened this probe into the state of California. They believe that through this LA County social services program, which serves elderly and disabled immigrants, it was specifically created actually to give aid, give welfare to immigrants who are here who don't otherwise qualify for welfare. So they use state funding to hand out aid, about, I think it's $1,100 a month for a single person. And they also give nursing home assistance. And the Trump administration believes that there is possibly some federal money going to this program that is being handed out to illegal immigrants. Now, of course, the state of California, LA County, says that this program is state funded, that these are people who are not undocumented in their words. And so the situation is a little murky because how they define undocumented, how the Trump administration defines illegal, they probably have 2 different definitions. But what we know is that, under the Biden administration, when we all saw that millions of illegal migrants were released after crossing the border, those people went on largely to obtain work permits, which they could do pretty much within like a month of crossing the border. So they were given work permits, and with that, they were given social security numbers. So they were able to, get put into the social security system. And this is something that the Trump administration has been outspoken against, and actually Doge. So this is part of that effort, because President Trump signed a memorandum earlier instructing his cabinet members to go after and kind of audit these systems and say, are we giving federal dollars to illegal immigrants? And so that's what this is all going back to.
It's so interesting, the semantics game of it all. And it's something that has plagued the ability for the right and the left to have a conversation about immigration, like a genuine conversation about what's happening with our immigration system, because we play this semantics game, right? It's not technically a crime to cross into the country. It's a civil infraction, the same way that it's a civil infraction to get pulled over and go over the speed limit, right? Now it's, whether they're undocumented or not, whether they have social security numbers that were doled out under an administration, perhaps illegally. That's just where it's so frustrating. Is I'd love to be able to come to a conclusion on these conversations, because I do think the majority of the American people side with President Trump on this issue. Every data point showcases that. But it's damn near impossible when we play these stupid semantic games about what word actually means what thing. Don't give money, federal money or state money, to people who are not here legally, who do not have legal status. Like, that is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is something the Biden administration tried to walk back on. There's law in place that that is working to ensure that illegal migrants are not a burden on the welfare system. And in fact, they, put a bunch of people into Social Security. And so I think that's also a legal question: is were they violating this? And I, think that maybe this is going to become a problem in the court system if the Trump administration is trying to investigate this. It seems like every time they go after like a liberal policy or state, then those policies that the Trump administration is trying to enact become, adjudicated by liberal judges or the court system. And this is something I kind of predicted would happen, is that, when Trump was trying to push his agenda, that you already had the ACLU ready to go. You already had these liberal organizations, these immigrant advocacy groups ready with cases, just like he did with the El Salvador deportation flights. So it remains to be seen also how this will play out when it comes to the bureaucratic system.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Again, thank you for the insight on these stories. Like, it's just so much better to hear it straight from somebody who lives this out every day, who knows the intimate details and how they kind of intrinsically they intertwine themselves as well. So you do have another immigration story. This one hits home for me, quite literally. Homeland Security has sent ICE agents out to Nashville, Tennessee, targeting gang members in the country illegally. And Nashville, which we very recently elected this super liberal, mega woke neighbor, well, sorry, he was my old neighbor, but mayor, Freddie O'Connell. And Freddie O'Connell and the city council in Nashville have responded to these ICE agents coming in by fighting against all of these federal operations. So DHS sent down these ICE agents to conduct traffic stops, specifically looking for gang members who should not be in the country because they're here illegally, engaged in gang activity. And it was a very successful operation. ICE detained 103 illegal immigrants, most with ties to gangs, and even one guy who was wanted for aggravated murder. So pretty successful operation. But after this, Nashville then implemented policies that, similar to a sanctuary city, limit how much the police can work with ICE. The police are not going to be asking about immigration status during routine interactions. They're not going to share that information with any federal agents anymore. And I was just sitting there like, oh my gosh, how with just one bad election are we on the brink of seeing, yes, a liberal city, but certainly not a bastion of leftism, become a nearly sanctuary city? And again, to your point of semantics, it's like the ICE agents are not coming for the legal immigrant Ricardo who busts tables at Jason Aldean's. That's not who they're going for, but that's what Democrats are trying to portray to the people of Nashville right now.
Right. I mean, and if we look back into Tennessee's history in pulling people over, we could go back to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the, Maryland father who was deported by the Trump administration. He's an alleged MS-13 member, and he was sent to SECOT in El Salvador. And of course, what we learned after he was deported is that not only was he an alleged MS-13 member, but he also was pulled over in Tennessee just a few years ago on the road. And he was with 8 other individuals in his car. The car had been retrofitted with an extra row in it. He was pulled over for speeding, but the cops who noticed this whole situation, that the group had been driving from Texas to Maryland, they were on the road for 3 days. They had no luggage. They became very suspicious, and they noted to each other that they suspected there was human trafficking going on. And actually, the owner of that vehicle turned out to be a human smuggler. So this is just one example of what they've encountered on the roads in Tennessee. It's a very relevant example. But, if we want to talk about sanctuary policies, the real issue is that when you don't allow immigration agents, federal agents, to conduct operations in your jails, mainly, that's really what this touches on, is if it goes so far as not allowing them into your jails, you're basically allowing illegal migrant criminals to get released. And who they normally terrorize is immigrant populations that are in the area. And so those are their main victims. And we're not talking about the guys who are busting the tables, like you said. We're not talking about individuals who are here, who are working, who are, just kind of operating. Maybe they're under the radar. Maybe they're undocumented. They don't have status here, but they're also not committing crimes. These are not the people we're talking about. We're talking about the people that have already been arrested by this mayor's authorities. And for a specific reason, they're charged with a crime or they've been convicted of a crime. Those people eventually serve their time, are released. And if there's a sanctuary law, they will totally ignore ICE's requests to hand them over swiftly in a safe manner. So then what you end up having is ICE having to go out into communities, conducting things like traffic stops. And there's a larger presence of them, and they're way more pronounced than you want them to be. So it kind of contradicts everything that sanctuary leaders want.
Yeah, it really backfires for them. And I did want to add one point of information for the audience as well, guys. So Nashville Democrats, again, the city council is almost entirely comprised of Democrats. They are considering displaying an immigration bill of rights. So on every government building across the city, there will be a bill of rights explaining what rights immigrants have. And it's very interesting because we don't know, again, to the semantics, whether they're going to put out the rights of immigrants, legal immigrants, or illegal immigrants, and then whether that will cause a point of confusion. So as someone that covers this issue extensively, Jennie, can you tell us and just clarify a little bit about what the so-called rights of illegal immigrants are? Because this is something that myself, my audience, we all get a little confused on. Again, because the semantics of it, there are different rights for legal immigrants, which I understand deeply because I am one, and then illegal immigrants, which they don't have the same rights that a legal immigrant would have. A legal immigrant would have. I should clarify that because illegal and illegal, they sound so similar.
Sure. Well, so if we talk about the migrants who cross the border illegally, like if we use that as an example, the ones under Biden, those individuals do have the right to an attorney in immigration court. They were paroled in mainly, and they were put into removal proceedings. So they are given the right to go to court, to have their case heard, to contest removal, deportation, and hire their own attorney. And they were at the time actually given some additional coverage. They could hide in churches, they could hide in schools. They were given some areas of sanctuary under federal law, and that's actually all been done with under the Trump administration. They said you can't do that anymore. Now, people think because that's gone, that ICE is just storming churches and schools. That's really not the case. I mean, my sources within ICE talk about the need to arrest individuals who are maybe dropping their kid off at school, who are maybe, trying to hide in a church, but they're not going in indiscriminately saying, oh, we heard there's a Spanish-speaking church service, so we're going to go in and, just go crazy here. I mean, that's not the situation. But there are a lot of issues that, come with the so-called rights that illegal immigrants have in the United States while they're having their case heard. They do not have the right to commit crimes in the United States, just like any of us. But they do have certain rights within the immigration court system. They are allowed due process.
Yeah, due process minus you, like you said, in America, for Americans with due process, we get assigned a representative, a legal representative, if we don't have anybody else. The illegal immigrants must pay for their own, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. And, in a lot of cases, though, especially right now under the Trump administration, we're seeing groups, immigration advocacy groups, give pro bono legal support to some of these illegal migrants, specifically a lot of the ones who are deported to El Salvador, some that the Trump administration intended to deport there in a second wave of flights. So there is that as well.
Interesting. I do want to get on to our next story, which is adjacent to the idea of crime. So, a college student tragically was executed in her sleep this week by a 30-year-old man who had 40 prior charges. And somehow this is kind of being blamed on Taylor Swift. So let me explain. 22-year-old Logan Federico was sleeping in a rental home, so think like an Airbnb, a VRBO, something like that. And then a 30-year-old man named Alexander Dickey broke in, shot her. She's no longer with us. She did not sustain her gunshot wounds. And then he stole all of her credit cards. So this young woman, she's like a community college student in Columbia, South Carolina. I believe she was planning on transferring to another college within the state to become a teacher. And Dickey was then caught going on a shopping spree with this girl's credit cards the next day. And first off, I just really thought we were past this whole like social justice soft on crime bullshit. Like, we knew this was happening in New York, but then South Carolina too. I'm like, this is crazy. What do you know from, the transition of the Trump team getting hard on immigration? Have you seen that same shift in a getting hard on cities that are doing these soft on crime policies? Because it just looks like even in big cities, even under Trump, we still see these policies. And we'll get to the Taylor Swift edition of this later, but let's start with the policy of it.
Sure. I think that something that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and the Department of Justice are talking about and trying to prioritize, and we've yet to see anything really sweeping come to fruition. So it is a big question mark right now, but it's definitely been brought up. And we know that this is happening all over the country. I mean, even here in Texas, you would think that this isn't happening here. Like in Harris County, where I live, we've had 160 killings. Those individuals who were killed were murdered by career criminals. They were released on bond by liberal judges here in Harris County. This is just, this is the largest county in Texas, but it's really remarkable to think that it's not just New York City. I mean, I'm sure your listeners and viewers know this, living and experiencing this, but there is, we all see it in big cities across the United States, whether in a blue state or red state, where you do have this influence of liberal judges, like you said, with a social justice agenda that they want to give people chances, second and third, fourth, fifth chances, like this individual had, who then go on to prove that they shouldn't be given chances and that this is their MO. They go out, they steal, they kill, like this guy did. And it's just something that I know the families have argued is totally preventable.
I always get a second chance. Sometimes I even get a third chance, depending on the crimes that have been committed. 40 chances is just, we're losing brain cells over here. We really are. But I want to transition this into the Taylor Swift aspect of it because I found this to be so fascinating. In almost all of the coverage of this story, news outlets keep noting that Logan, the girl, was this die-hard Swiftie. And I think part of it is to paint a picture of how innocent she was. But simultaneously, they were pointing to the irony that Taylor Swift often backs the political party associated with these soft on crime policies that, again, let a 40-time felon out of prison. And I was scrolling through the comment sections on some of these videos, and it was toggling through my mind, like, is this just the reality of being, Taylor Swift? You're going to get blamed for some random girl's death because she was your fan? Or is this just like blatant politicizing of tragedy? I can't see if this is like this is the reality of being a superstar, or it's just an insane irony of the circumstance and we should just move on from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like it's to show her as this innocent girl who's just like any of us. And, whatever Taylor Swift supports or not, it's kind of like that argument, like, shut up and sing. People argue that, yes, you have this agenda, keep it to yourself. And if you do, a lot of fans will put that to the side because they just want to hear your music. They just want to hear your talent. So, you know, did Taylor Swift play a role in this? I'm not sure, but I know that, it sounds like she was just like any of us, and I think that's the picture that's being painted here.
I agree. I think it's like this detail that's now been expunged or like sent out into the ether and giving people ideas that maybe had it not been created or the intention of it was like really pure, and it's just not coming across that way on social media. But social media is a cesspool for discussing people. Anyway, I do want to get to our fifth and final story, which is something you had mentioned at the top of today's show, that Hamas released Adnan Alexander, the last living American hostage taken into Gaza on October 7th. He holds dual Israeli-American citizenship. He's just 21 years old. He was born in Israel, but he lived most of his life in New Jersey. He was serving with the Israeli Defense Forces when he was taken hostage on October 7th and has reunited with his family after being in captivity for 583 days. Jennie, I know you are Jewish. As a Jewish woman, do you just feel an intense relief? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's yesterday was kind of like relieving and torturous all at the same time because you have, someone that is getting released, and all of these hostage deals have kind of been the same. It's kind of just been like a wait and see and trust that Hamas is going to deliver on their word, and that's very hard when it's a terrorist organization. I think, that's how the US views it too in their negotiations. And so we did get Idan back, and that's a remarkable feat. And, these hostages are incredibly inspiring when they've come out of captivity like that, gone on to use their voice to speak out against anti-Semitism and terrorism. I think it's really amazing and a lesson to us all that you can really overcome anything, and you can, go out and be a voice for these other individuals who are suffering. I mean, we still have hostages there. Some are dead, but those bodies have not been returned. And I think it's amazing to see these images of Idan with the American flag and the Israeli flag, showing support for both countries that he's a citizen of. And, it's just something that we saw just like a flip of a switch with the Trump administration come back and basically start to prioritize getting our hostages back, not just in Israel and in Gaza, but throughout the world. It's been a remarkable campaign carried out by the president and his members of his cabinet.
Yeah, and just as context, when Adnan was taken from Red Cross over to Tel Aviv, he was holding a sign that said, "Thank you, President Trump." So that's awesome. But last night when I was thinking about this story, it was giving me just a lot of pause thinking about how human beings, we don't always take into context the emotional torture the way that we do physical torture, right? We do a really good job as people, and I include myself in this, at contextualizing how scary it would be if we heard a bomb drop near us, right? But we don't do a very good job at contextualizing how scary it would be to live in captivity for 583 days without ever knowing whether that was going to come to an end or not. And so I was starting to think about how truly sinister what's happening is. And I know it's sinister. This is not like a revelation to me. But it was just kind of eye-opening to see the tactic of it come to life, that terror organizations know that. They know that captivity for 583 days will psychologically destroy a person. And it's much more difficult for the global stage to empathize with that, because we're all like, oh, if I was there, I'd handle it fine. Like, I'd be okay. I'd do this. I'd do that. No. Like, it is torture, plain and simple, even if it's not, something that you experience. But I was just thinking about how evil the tactics of what Hamas are doing.
Yeah, it's horrible. And I think so many of these hostages that we've seen come out have long battles ahead of them when it comes to the psychological torture. I mean, all of these physical issues, I mean, some may be persistent, but, they're getting medical attention, and, hopefully a lot of those physical things can be solved. But the mental is probably the hardest, but I think it speaks to the importance of faith. And when it comes to these individuals, I mean, you hear stories about what they were doing in captivity, and the ones who were grouped together, thank God they had each other, but they also, found that they would recite prayers, they would recite some of our psalms, they would find ways to just keep God in the mix when things were so dark. I mean, it's amazing that they could find that when you're literally in dark, when you're in a tunnel, when you're starved, when you're tortured. And it's just, again, I think it's just a really important message of what faith can do to keep someone, um, going in those horrible, horrific situations.
Yeah, 11 months ago, I actually had the pleasure of meeting Adon Alexander's extended family in Tel Aviv while they were fighting for his release, and that was last June. And then they had these tunnel exhibits where you could sit in the tunnels, and the survivors that had come out of being held in captivity tried to recreate it so that people could walk through the tunnels and experience what being in captivity was like. And let me just tell you guys, I had PTSD from being in the tunnel, the fake tunnel that was created as a fake scenario for like 30 seconds while I walked through it. So I can't imagine what 583 days would do to you. But thank you, Jennie, for your insight. Thank you for coming on today's show. If people want to find your work, where can they follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Jennie Taer and on TikTok at Jennie the Reporter. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, stick around, friends. You won't want to miss the updates coming out about the Diddy trial. As of Monday, May 12th, the Diddy trial is underway. Before Diddy even walked into the courtroom, his legal team started claiming that there were elements of racial bias in the jury picks. Diddy's lawyers and the prosecutors in New York were both given a certain number of strikes for potential jurors. So this happens anytime you're picking a jury, like the jury selection process. Both sides get a certain number of strikes for potential jurors who they don't want on the final jury for whatever reason, be it their employment. There is an element that you're not supposed to do it based on race, but I think that is inherent in it. I think we saw that with the OJ trial a little bit as well. You see it specifically in that OJ's legal team didn't want a white person on. So you see it both ways. Anyway, the facts of the case, the prosecutors used 7 of their 9 strikes to omit Black people from the jury, and Diddy's legal team then proceeded to argue that there was racial bias in that. The Judge Aaron Subramian, yes. Judge Aaron Subramian sided with prosecutors and said there was no racial bias in the jury selection. So here is the final gender and race breakdown of the jury. There are 8 men and 4 women. 4 of the jurors are white. The rest are non-white. The trial is slated to go until July 4th, so 6 weeks. And all of the jury members should remain anonymous until then. They age in ranges from about their 30s to their 70s, and they have a litany of different backgrounds. Some are in marketing analysis, some are in the medical field. I could not think of the word there. The medical field, but they range, okay? Some of the biggest bombshells of day one, though, include some terrible stories. So viewer discretion is advised from this point to the end of the show. Prosecutors alleged that Diddy paid a male escort to have sex with his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. It is alleged that Diddy recorded these interactions and then threatened Cassie to release the videos. Jurors also heard a lot about Diddy's alleged freak-offs and alleged that Diddy paid a male escort to urinate in Cassie Ventura's mouth. That is the allegation made by a male escort who got up on the stage and said these things on the stand under oath at the trial. Diddy's legal team argued that the prosecutors are going to try to paint consensual relationships as criminal, when in actuality, all of these interactions were consensual, according to Diddy's defense team. And that's certainly not a terrible argument, as I opine here. It's not illegal to be kinky. But the trial has just begun, so we'll see what actual evidence comes out. Right now, day one was really about setting the stage and the standard of Diddy's personality, who he is, and what was happening. Again, these charges really do focus a lot on racketeering, which is more of a business element, and we haven't gotten into that. We did not see any of that happen in day one, other than the opening remarks made from the prosecutor's side. The other fascinating aspect of day one was how shocked jurors appeared to be by Diddy's hair. So Diddy does not have hair dye in prison, so his hair, which was traditionally black, got gray. And there are experts out there opining that this could actually be beneficial for Diddy because it makes him look old. Old people are traditionally viewed as quite sympathetic to the average person. And it also kind of separates him from the pictures and the videos the jurors will see of him, right? He looks a little distant from it in time, giving jurors just this sentiment like, oh, well, this might have been the old him. He might regret this, right? Not to say it's true, but it can give that kind of air. Much of the first day, though, upon reviewing it, following it closely, was really about Diddy's relationship and alleged abuse of Cassie Ventura. This has been the big thing that we've known publicly, but this is how day one of the prosecution kicked off. Like I said, a male escort testified, and he did testify that he was paid $6,000 a pop for Diddy to watch him and Cassie get it on. And the escort claimed that Diddy would pay to watch what he called sex marathons, which would last up to 10 hours. And if the male escort could not perform properly for 10 hours, that male escort would not get paid by Diddy, according to this male escort again. And I think that's what's very difficult for people to wrap their minds around is like, we have male escorts and women who were dating Diddy and then Diddy. It's like it's all perhaps bad actors in the eyes of the American public. So it's very difficult to know who to believe when everybody is notoriously tied to very questionable acts. The final part of the day one of Diddy's trial that I want to mention to you guys is that prosecutors alleged Diddy paid $100,000 to bury that now infamous video of him assaulting Cassie at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles. Diddy allegedly slipped cash to a hotel security guard to keep the footage quiet. It was ultimately obtained and published by CNN last year, and then jurors were actually shown that footage yesterday during trial. So that has entered trial for now. That is all I have for you in terms of Diddy trial updates for today. I will be on this story nonstop. You can pretty much guarantee that the last 10 to 20 minutes of every Underreported show for the next 6 weeks will be dedicated to Diddy trial updates, as well as other legal updates as Luigi Mangioni's case is nearing, as Brian Kohberger's case is nearing as well. And I'm doing my best to get some legal experts on here so that we can kind of verify, although I do verify all of my work, but just get a little bit more insight, just like we had with Jennie today. We can tell you the facts, but it's nice to have somebody that knows the through line of all of the facts because they study it and they do it in their day-to-day life. So anyway, if you're a real one and you made it to the end of today's show, will you drop the storm emoji as an homage to the Democrats who stormed an ICE facility? Get it? Kind of funny. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here on Thursday. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment about how beautiful, intelligent, and funny I am. And if you want more content, click right over here for more videos and clips of my show. I'll see you back here next time. Bye!